Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for just walking in. I'm in the process of chairing another committee that is going on simultaneously. In March 2020, Congress faced an unexpected challenge. The COVID-19 virus was sweeping through the country. To stem the spread of infections, federal, state, and local governments implemented stay-at-home orders and shuttered businesses nationwide. At the time, Congress worried that nationwide government mandate shutdowns would shutter businesses and leave countless American families without a source of income to meet their existing financial obligations. Congress was equally concerned that a rapid rise in delinquent rental payments would lead to widespread eviction and mass displacement. On March 27, Congress responded to this concern with Section 4024 of the CARES Act. Section 4024B of the CARES Act imposed nationwide moratorium on evictions from federally supported housing for 120 days. At the time, a nationwide eviction moratorium was an unprecedented exercise of federal authority over housing. The 120-day timeline reassured property owners that this federal intervention was a temporary response to the unprecedented threat of COVID-19. Congress made no substantial effort to extend the moratorium beyond the period in statute because it was never intended to be permanent. In 2021, the Biden administration acted to extend the moratorium under a separate authority, but this extension was later overturned by the Supreme Court. While Section 4024B expired as intended, Section 4024C contained no explicit sunset. 4024C provided that eviction proceedings could not begin until 30 days after a tenant had been given notice to vacate. 4024C was crafted to protect tenants from immediate eviction for non-payment during the moratorium. Its purpose was directly related to the moratorium and was not intended to become a permanent fixture of law. The ambiguous language of the original law and the lack of a clear sunset period have led some to believe that Congress intended to permanently usurp state notice to vacate laws. H.R. 802 would strike Section 4024C, eliminating any ambiguity in the law that remains today. Before my colleagues assert that this bill would make it easier to evict non-paying tenants from public housing, let me be clear. Prior to the CARES Act, HUD had its own notice to vacate requirements for different types of public housing. My bill would not affect requirements that were in statute or regulation prior to the CARES Act. It would simply clarify and execute Congress's intent for the original provision and resolve the ambiguity it has created. Property owners across the country demand this clarity, and lack of congressional action will affect participation in the various covered programs due to the risk that tenants may remain on the property without payment for a prolonged period. That is why my bill is supported by a broad coalition in the residential real estate sector. Without objection, I'd like to insert their letters of support.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prolonged occupation with non-payment presents particular risks to retirees and military service members. A property manager recently shared this story with my office. In 2022, they were managing a rental owned by an 86-year-old widow. The widow decided to move out of her 30-year family home to a smaller apartment and use the monthly rental income from her home to rent a smaller apartment. When the tenants fell behind on rent, the widow nearly lost her own apartment. Despite good faith efforts to assist the tenants by allowing them to make partial payments, the tenant decided not to pay at all and continued to occupy the home for another 3 months without payment due to Section 4024C and delays in the local court. The widow lost her apartment and ended up staying in a homeless shelter. To make matters worse, once the eviction was finalized and the property manager was able to survey the home, they found that the tenants had caused thousands of dollars of damage to the property. The widow was forced to move back into her now vandalized home to avoid homelessness and passed away shortly thereafter. This is just one of the hundreds of stories we've heard since introducing H.R. 802. There are countless others just like this, where delays in evictions caused immeasurable suffering for property owners who depend on rental income to support themselves in retirement. I've heard stories from service members stationed overseas, retirees, and young families looking to jumpstart their financial future only to end up underwater due to non-paying tenants. The effects of Section 4024C aren't just limited to large property managers or real estate investors. The confusion this section has created is a threat to the financial security of families in every one of our districts. Finally, striking Section 4024C eliminates jurisdictional uncertainty. Last year, HUD argued that tenancy law is a patchwork across states and in need of unifying federal framework. However, subjecting properties with a federal nexus to requirements that differ from local law creates the very same patchwork the HUD claims to want to address. There is no need for further federal regulation when in fact it would create the very same problem it was supposed to address. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.